There is a question science has only recently found language for, and it may be one you have carried longer than you realize. Why does being silently understood by an animal soothe a sadness you can't explain to people? Beneath every fact tonight, that question waits, patient, unhurried, already beginning to loosen something. Let the weight of the day rest where you are. Whatever you were sorting through before this moment, you can set it down here. You don't need to hold any of it for the next 2 hours. Something quiet is moving toward you through the dark, the way an animal moves when it knows before you do. Welcome to Psychology for Sleep. Breathe once. Let tonight begin without instruction. Picture an animal you have known settling close, not asking, not requiring anything, simply present at the edge of what you carry. Welcome to Psychology for Sleep. That question goes with us now, into the quiet and into the night. A dog lying beside a person who has been sitting quietly for a long time has not moved. The dog has not looked away, offered a toy, or shifted to a more comfortable position. It is still there, pressed warm against a leg, breathing steadily. Researchers studying bonding behavior in domestic dogs call this proximity maintenance during emotional distress. A measurable, consistent response in which dogs reduce their own activity and increase physical contact when they detect body signals of sadness in a nearby human. The dog did not need to be told, did not wait to be asked, and has not grown impatient. These are not accidents of training. They are the shape of a particular kind of attention. Underneath what we trace tonight sits one quiet question. Why does being known this way, without words, settle something that words have not? A cat that normally sleeps in a separate room has been sleeping across a person's feet for 11 days, through a difficult week that stretched into 2. The person has not asked for this. The cat, by any behavioral measure, is choosing it. Studies of feline proximity behavior during human emotional states show that cats, often mischaracterized as indifferent to human distress, do adjust their spatial behavior in response to changes in human affect, voice, and posture. The 11 days match, almost exactly, the most acute window of a difficult period. The cat did not read a pamphlet. It read something older than language in the air of that room. A horse in a paddock has turned its entire body to face a person standing at the fence, and has held that orientation for a full 7 minutes without any movement. Equine behavioral research documents this as an orienting response toward emotional weight. The horse detecting changes in cortisol, breathing pattern, and postural tension that register as distinct from baseline. The horse is not reacting to a sound or a sudden movement. It is reacting to something more subtle, the specific quality of stillness that arrives with an unexpressed heaviness. Horses are prey animals whose survival once depended on reading the nervous systems of those around them. That same sensitivity now turns, unhurried, toward a person at a fence who has said nothing at all. Domestic dogs have been shown to distinguish the sound of a person crying from the sound of a person humming, and to approach the crying person at significantly higher rates. A study published in the journal Animal Cognition found that dogs crossed a barrier to reach a crying stranger more often than they crossed to reach a stranger making neutral sounds. Critically, the dogs did not show signs of distress themselves. They appeared calm during approach, which researchers interpreted as goal-directed comfort-seeking rather than catching another's distress. The sound of human sadness functions as a specific signal, not an alarm, an invitation to come closer, to be present, to not look away. A parrot that has lived with a person for several years begins to make soft, low vocalizations, sounds it only produces in this register, when that person is quietly sad in another room. Parrots are among the most socially sensitive birds studied. Research into parrot emotional attunement suggests that long-bonded parrots track the emotional states of their human companions with a degree of specificity that mirrors what social monitoring looks like in highly bonded pairs. The soft, low vocalization, not alarm, not mimicry, not solicitation, is something researchers describe as contact calling, a signal that means, in its simplest translation, I am here. You are not alone in this room. A dog whose owner has been going through a difficult period shows measurable changes in its own behavioral rhythms within weeks. The dog sleeps more during the day, initiates play less, and increases time spent in physical proximity to the owner. Researchers who study canine behavioral patterns describe this as co-regulation through mirroring, the dog's nervous system falling into the quieter, heavier rhythm of the person it lives with. This is not catching another's distress. It is companionship at the level of biology. Two bodies finding the same tempo. The way two people breathing in the same room will sometimes, without noticing, begin to breathe at the same rate. Horses lower their heart rate when approached by a person who is calm, and show elevated rates when approached by a person who is anxious, even when the person's behavior appears controlled. Research conducted at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences found that horses detect and mirror human cardiac arousal states through proximity alone. The mechanism involves a combination of scent cues, hormones released through the skin, and subtle postural reading. A person who is internally frightened but outwardly still is not invisible to a horse. The body tells a story the face does not. The horse reads the body. Cats have a resting purr frequency between 25 and 50 Hz, a range that overlaps with the frequency range used in vibration therapy for tissue healing and stress reduction in humans. Whether cats evolved this frequency for their own benefit, for communication, or as a byproduct of breathing is still under study. What is established is that humans in contact with a purring cat show measurable reductions in stress markers, the body's stress hormone, heart rate, blood pressure. The cat did not intend to be medicine. It simply purrs, and that purring lands at exactly the frequency at which a tense body begins to soften. A dog that has spent its life with one person begins to greet that person differently after a significant change. The greeting longer, the contact more sustained, the separation at the door slower than before. Behavioral ethologists note that dogs track the emotional baseline of their bonded humans over time. A change in that baseline, through loss, illness, or transition, alters the dog's greeting behavior in ways that parallel how an attuned friend might lean in more closely after something difficult has happened. The dog does not know what changed. It knows only that something has shifted in the person it watches most carefully, and it responds to that shift with more, and slower, and closer. Across species, dogs, cats, horses, parrots, rabbits, even rats in laboratory settings, the pattern holds. Animals bonded to humans register human emotional states through body signals that bypass language entirely. The mechanism is not learning-based in the conventional sense. Researchers who study cross-species sensitivity describe a shared sensory vocabulary that predates speech by millions of years. One built from chemical signals, body temperature, micromuscular tension, respiratory rhythm, and cardiac output. Before there were words for sadness, there were bodies that recognized it. The animals around us still read from that original text. They have never stopped reading it. That recognition, the thing an animal does before you have spoken a word, is what we're tracing tonight. Dogs can identify specific human individuals by smell alone, and can distinguish between a person's baseline scent and their stress scent with an accuracy above 90%. A 2021 study, published in PLOS One, found that dogs correctly identified samples taken from humans during a stressful task from samples taken from the same person in a calm state, without visual or auditory cues. The stress scent is altered by the release of adrenaline and the body's stress hormone through perspiration. What this means, practically, is that a dog sitting next to you in a quiet room already knows something is happening inside you, before your face has moved, before you have reached for your phone, before you have decided whether to say anything at all. A rabbit that lives with a person prone to panic attacks has been documented to position itself on the person's chest during episodes, without training. Rabbits are not traditionally used in clinical emotional support contexts the way dogs are, but case studies in human-animal bond research have documented this behavior repeatedly. The weight and warmth of the rabbit, roughly 4 to 5 pounds, settled and still, functions as a form of deep pressure input that activates the calming branch of the nervous system in the human. The rabbit is not administering therapy. It is doing what small social animals do when another member of their group is in distress. It moves toward the warmth, and it stays there. A person who rates their emotional pain as high after a difficult conversation shows significantly lower ratings within 10 minutes of sitting with a dog, with no other intervention. Multiple studies confirm this effect. The reduction in pain ratings correlates with measurable body changes, decreased stress hormone, increased oxytocin, and a reduction in the muscle tension patterns associated with emotional holding. The dog does not know it is doing any of this. It is simply sitting. But sitting, it turns out, is sometimes the most accurate response available. More accurate, in certain moments, than any word. The dog carries no agenda about being helpful, and yet here it is. Having helped, cats that have lived with the same person for more than 2 years develop what researchers call a person-specific behavioral signature, a distinct pattern of behavior they display with that individual and no one else. This signature includes vocalizations, touch, initiations, and proximity patterns that do not appear in interactions with strangers, even strangers who are calm and friendly. The cat is not performing these behaviors for attention or food. They appear most consistently during moments of low arousal, quiet, or sadness in the bonded person. The cat has, over 2 years, developed a specific language for one specific person. It is a language with no words. Wild elephants, when a member of their group is dying, will gather around that individual and maintain physical contact, touching the dying elephant with their trunks for hours. This vigil behavior has been documented across multiple field studies in Africa and Asia. The elephants vocalize in low rumbles, maintain proximity, and in some cases attempt to lift the dying individual. Researchers who study elephant social cognition describe this as a form of sustained bonding response to mortality, a behavior that maps, in its form and function, almost exactly onto what grief looks like when it is shared. The elephants cannot fix what is happening. They come anyway. They stay. A dog that has lived in a home where domestic conflict was frequent will show behavioral vigilance in situations that resemble the precursors to that conflict. A raised voice in another room, a particular tension in the air before an argument. The dog learned, not through deliberate training but through lived experience, to read the emotional weather of its environment. These same dogs often demonstrate a marked movement toward the person who appeared most distressed during the conflict events, placing themselves between that person and the disruption, settling close. The dog has learned who needs it most, and it goes there, without instruction, because attention has its own kind of knowledge. Horses that work with people in therapeutic settings show measurable changes in their behavior when a rider or handler begins to cry. They slow, soften their neck, and often turn their head toward the person's face. Equine-assisted therapy practitioners and researchers note this response consistently, and it is one of the most documented phenomena in the field. The horse, already a large and powerful animal, becomes demonstrably gentler, its body language shifting toward accommodation rather than assertion. The softening is involuntary. It follows the cry the way a response follows a signal. The horse has received something, and its body answers. Research into the hormone oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, shows that levels rise in both humans and dogs during mutual gaze, and rise even higher during physical contact combined with mutual gaze. The same feedback loop that operates between a parent and infant operates between a person and their dog. The human's oxytocin rises. The dog's oxytocin rises. The human's rises again in response. The two nervous systems are not merely in proximity. They are in conversation, passing a signal of recognition back and forth between them. Across the silence and the species line, something is being exchanged that neither side chose, and neither side needs to explain. A cat will sometimes rest its forehead against the forehead of a person who is sad, in a gesture behavioral researchers call bunting, a mark of social belonging and trust. In feline social structures, bunting is reserved for members of the cat's closest group. It is not a random affectionate gesture. It is a territorial and relational signal that means, you are mine, and I am yours. And this is the boundary of what is safe. A cat that bunts you when you are carrying something heavy is not offering pity. It is offering membership. It is saying, the circle of what I protect includes you, exactly as you are right now. Dogs have been shown to yawn in response to their owner's yawn, but not in response to a stranger's yawn. Contagious yawning is associated in humans and some primates with empathy, the capacity to internally model another's state, the selectivity of the dog's response. It spreads through the bond, not through species membership, suggests the dog is not simply mimicking a motor reflex. It is responding to something person-specific, a resonance that only occurs along the channel of an existing relationship. It yawns because you yawned, and because it is you, that distinction The bond, as the carrier, is the whole thing. A person experiencing chronic loneliness who begins spending regular time with a companion animal shows a significant reduction in loneliness scores over months, with the most meaningful shift occurring in the first few weeks. The reduction is not explained by increased social contact with other people, though that sometimes also increases. The change comes before any shift in the human social network. Something in the company of the animal, its undemanding presence, its consistency, its physical warmth, addresses something in the person before the rest of the world has had a chance to. The animal arrives in the loneliness before the solution does. Wolves, the ancestors of domestic dogs, have been documented to show differentiated responses to pack members based on individual emotional state, approaching injured, distressed, or recently bereaved pack members with behaviors that differ from those directed at healthy members. This differentiated care is one of the features of wolf social behavior that researchers believe gave rise to the capacity for empathy now observable in domestic dogs. The capacity that drove those wolves toward their distressed companions did not disappear when the wolf became a dog. It simply found a new pack to attend to. The dog beside you carries, in its behavioral repertoire, millions of years of practice at reading what is actually happening to the ones it runs with. A person who was told in childhood that animals don't really understand human emotion, and believed it for decades, often describes something specific upon receiving an animal's silent comfort. Not surprise at the animal, but recognition, as though the animal confirmed something they already suspected was true. This is not anecdote. Survey research into human-animal bond experiences documents this theme consistently. The encounter with an animal during sadness or distress does not feel foreign. It feels, in the words of respondents, like being remembered by something that was always paying attention. The animal does not introduce a new idea. It answers a very old one. In neuroimaging studies, the brain regions activated when a person looks at a photograph of their pet closely overlap with the brain regions activated when they look at a photograph of a close friend or family member. The overlap is not complete, but it is significant enough that researchers suggest the bond formed between humans and companion animals engages the same neural architecture as deep human social bonding. The brain does not appear to distinguish, at the level of its most fundamental circuitry, between the love offered by a person and the love offered by a dog. Both light the same rooms. A dog sitting quietly beside a person does not stay because it is confused, or habituated, or seeking food. Studies of dog motivation during emotional proximity show that the behavior is approach motivated. The dog moves toward, not away, from human distress, and that removing the person from the dog's sight during these moments produces protest behaviors associated with social separation. The dog wants to be there, not in the way that can be explained away, in the way that means something. It has been there, in this particular way, long before any of us had language for it, and it will still be there when the language runs out again. The question we arrived with has been accumulating evidence, not closing, still open, but the first arc has gathered, animal after animal, species after species, all registered the same signal. Something in you is already quieter than when we began. That dog in Fact 25, the one that wanted to stay, is still there. Not as a fact now, as something quieter, as a feeling you may have recognized before you could name it. The question we came with has not been answered. but it has started to feel less like a question and more like a door that was already open. And you have been standing just outside it for a long time. Your breathing has slowed without you asking it to. That is the same thing the dog was doing. Across 9 species studied: dogs, cats, horses, parrots, rabbits, goats, rats, pigs, and donkeys. Researchers have documented at least one measurable behavioral response to human emotional distress that was not present in response to neutral human states. The species differ in how they respond. Some approach, some vocalize, some simply orient and remain still. But the underlying sensitivity appears to be a consistent feature of species that have lived in sustained proximity with humans. Co-evolution, researchers suggest, may have selected for emotional attunement. The animals that were better at reading human states may have survived better in human environments. And passed that sensitivity forward. We may have, without knowing it, bred the witnesses we needed. A person who regularly spends 10 to 15 minutes in calm contact with a cat or dog shows not only reduced stress hormone, but increased serotonin and dopamine, neurotransmitters associated with mood, regulation, and reward. The effect size is comparable to some non-pharmacological mood interventions. It does not require a deep bond. Even contact with an unfamiliar calm animal produces detectable changes. The body responds to the animal's warmth, texture, and rhythmic breathing, as though something it was looking for has arrived. The search ends. The hand rests. Dogs have approximately 300 million scent receptors in their noses, compared to approximately 6 million in humans, giving them a sensitivity to chemical signals estimated to be 10,000 to 100,000 times greater than our own. This is the instrument through which a dog reads you. When your body's stress hormone changes, the dog detects it, not as a concept, but as a physical shift in the air around you, as concrete and present as the difference between 2 kinds of weather. You carry your emotional state in your body like a scent. The dog has been reading that text the entire time you were trying to find words for it. In palliative care settings, therapy dogs that visit patients in the final weeks of life consistently produce the same cluster of responses: reduced reported pain, increased verbal engagement with family members present, and a visible softening of facial tension. Healthcare providers who use animal-assisted interventions in end-of-life care note that the dog's presence sometimes opens conversations that nurses and chaplains have been unable to open. The patient who has said nothing for days will speak. To the dog, or because of the dog, or simply because the dog's arrival has done something to the room that shifts what feels possible. The dog has no name for what it is doing. It has simply entered the room and stayed. Rats, when a companion rat is trapped and distressed, will work to free it, even foregoing a chocolate reward to do so. A 2011 study at the University of Chicago demonstrated this behavior consistently. The free rat showed body signals of distress at the trapped rat's situation, and its helping behavior was not explained by simple curiosity about the trap. Cage mates, not strangers. The rat appears to be motivated by something that researchers cautiously term empathy-like behavior, an internal response to another's distress that produces action toward relief. Even rats, even small, even in the dark, something moves toward the one who is trapped. A horse that has been handled with fear and dominance for years will, when placed with a gentle handler, take a measurable amount of time to relearn trust, but will eventually show the same behavioral markers of safety it showed before the fearful period began. Equine behavioral therapists document this process as emotional recovery through consistent relational experience. The horse does not forget what happened, but the body, over time, relearns a different expectation. That proximity can mean safety, that closeness can be chosen rather than forced. The timeline varies. The destination does not. Something in the horse moves, at its own pace, back toward trust. It does not give up on the possibility. Dogs that live in households with people who have post-traumatic stress show spontaneous behavioral adaptations, waking the person during nightmares, moving physically between the person and the trigger, maintaining closer proximity during high-stress periods. Without formal training. Research into informal support behaviors in companion dogs found these adaptations in roughly 40% of dogs studied in households with untrained PTSD contexts. The dogs were not taught. They observed. They responded. They calibrated their behavior to the specific needs of the specific person they lived with. Over time, through the accumulation of attention, the formal training of service dogs takes months. Some dogs arrive there on their own. A person who describes themselves as not a dog person, who does not seek out dog contact and finds it mildly uncomfortable, still shows oxytocin elevation in response to a gentle dog making eye contact with them. The bond is not required. The species response precedes the personal preference. The dog activates something in the human nervous system that is older than opinion, older than cultural distance from animals, older than the learned discomfort of people who grew up without pets. Something in the dog's gaze addresses something in the human brain that was waiting, unaware, for exactly this signal, even when the person would not have chosen it. Chimpanzees, when a member of their group dies, have been observed to groom the body and maintain proximity to it for extended periods, sometimes days. This behavior has been interpreted through multiple frameworks: confusion, social habit, grieving. The most recent research in great ape behavior suggests it is consistent with what prolonged bonding response to loss looks like: a persistent social orientation that does not respond to the usual cues, signaling someone is simply absent. The chimpanzee stays with what it cannot accept as gone. There is something recognizable in that. The way the body insists on presence at the edge of absence. What the chimpanzee does at the edge of loss, the shelter dog does in the smaller way available to it. It moves toward what is offered. Shelter dogs that experience regular social contact with humans, even brief daily interactions of 15 minutes, show significantly lower stress hormone levels and increased behavioral well-being indicators compared to those with minimal contact. The threshold for effect is low, 15 minutes. A person who entered a shelter intending to walk a dog and came back 45 minutes later and repeated this 3 days a week. That contact, that rhythm of arriving and leaving and arriving again, regulates the animal's nervous system. The animal learns that someone comes back. The learning, by itself, changes the body. Horses in herd settings synchronize their heart rates with each other during periods of rest, particularly between horses with strong bonding ties. This phenomenon, documented through cardiac monitoring in social groups, suggests that rest is a shared state in horses, not merely an individual withdrawal, but a coordinated dropping of arousal across the group. When one horse in a bonded pair rests, the other's cardiac output follows. The two bodies have become, over time, a single system for the purpose of settling. The rest of one is the rest of the other. A person who has been carrying something heavy alone reports feeling less alone after an animal enters the room, even if the animal does not approach, even if contact does not occur. Survey research into emotional support animal experiences documents this effect consistently. The animal's presence, it's simply being in the same space, breathing, existing with its own quiet agenda, shifts the person's subjective experience of solitude. Being alone in a room with a living thing is not the same as being alone. The animal does not have to do anything. Its being there is already something. And if no animal is with you tonight, the memory of one, held clearly, may be enough. Cats have specialized cells in their skin that detect pressure and temperature changes, making them exquisitely sensitive to the physical states of the humans they rest against. When a cat lies against a person who is carrying something difficult, it is resting against a body with altered breathing and an irregular heartbeat. The cat does not interpret these changes the way a physician would, but it registers them with its whole body, a living instrument pressed flat against another living instrument. Reading what is happening through skin, the cat knows before it knows. Across the last several facts, something has accumulated. The animal does not distinguish between your good days and your hard ones. It is always reading the same thing. It is always reading you. Something has settled in the room since we began. You may have noticed your breathing is different. The facts have been slower. Perhaps. There is no hurry. Let one breath in and let it out unheld. The animals we have been tracing are still there, patient, reading nothing that isn't real. We continue in that same direction. A dog that has lived through significant loss, the death of a bonded companion animal, or the departure of a family member, shows behavioral changes that mirror human responses to loss. Reduced appetite, disrupted sleep, decreased interest in play, increased proximity seeking with remaining members of the household. The American Veterinary Medical Association recognizes grief as a real phenomenon in dogs. The behavioral changes are consistent, measurable, and time-bound. They typically resolve over weeks to months, with variation based on the depth of the original bond. The dog does not understand what happened in the way a human does, but its body understands absence. The body holds what the mind cannot name. In a laboratory setting, dogs shown photographs of human faces displaying happiness, fear, anger, sadness, and disgust demonstrated different behavioral and physical responses to each expression, with the greatest and most sustained response to sadness. The dogs spent more time looking at sad faces, showed more approach orientation towards sad faces, and demonstrated calmer states while viewing sadness compared to the arousal responses triggered by anger or fear. Sadness does not alarm the dog. It draws the dog closer. The emotion that most often isolates people from each other is the precise emotion that most reliably pulls a dog in. A person described by their therapist as emotionally closed. Someone who had not cried in years, who could not access grief, reported their first emotional release in the presence of a therapy dog during a session. The therapist had introduced the dog experimentally. After months of work, the dog approached, settled on the person's feet, and within minutes, the person began to cry. The therapist reported that she had done nothing different that day. What changed was the dog's arrival. Something about the animal's unconditioned presence, its absence of agenda, its inability to be disappointed, opened a passage that the therapeutic relationship had not yet found. The dog had only come close and stayed. That was enough. The licking behavior of mother rats toward their pups within the first hours of life has been shown to permanently alter the pup's stress response system. Specifically, the stress-regulating pathways deep in the brain that govern how the body manages stress hormones throughout life. Pups who are licked more in the first 24 hours develop a stress response that is measurably more regulated throughout their lives. Those who are licked less develop heightened and less controllable stress responses. The mother is not administering treatment. She is simply doing what her body knows to do. And that warmth applied consistently to the small body, reaches all the way down into the architecture of who the pup becomes. Touch, repeated, presence, sustained, something permanent, built from something simple. A dog that has been with a person through a depression, a divorce, a bereavement, and is now old, still knows how to lean against that person in the way it first learned when the difficult thing was happening. The posture is not retrieved through deliberate memory. It is embedded in the body, the way muscle memory is embedded, as a pattern that activates in the presence of its original conditions. The body knows who this person is when they are grieving. The body moves accordingly. The old dog and the difficult years are not separate things. They were learned together, and the body holds both. People who have experienced relational trauma, a background of emotional unavailability or unpredictability in early caregiving, often describe the experience of animal attachment differently than those without that history. For many, the animal is their first experience of a bond that does not withdraw, punish, or require performance. Researchers who study the therapeutic dimensions of human-animal bonds note that for people with relational trauma, the animal offers what developmental psychologists call a corrective emotional experience. Not through intervention, but through simple, repeated, consistent presence. None of this is deliberate on the animal's part. It is simply there, again, and again, and again. And the brain, which is still capable of learning what safety feels like, begins to learn. In the aftermath of natural disasters, search and rescue workers who have access to therapy dogs between shifts show lower rates of secondary traumatic stress than those who do not. The effect is specific. The reduction cannot be explained by rest alone, or by social support from human colleagues, which was controlled for in the study. The dog is the variable, something in the contact with the calm animal, its warmth, its breathing, its indifference to what the rescue worker has just seen, interrupts the cycle of physiological hyperarousal that, when sustained, becomes secondary trauma. The animal cannot carry what the rescue worker carries, but it can stand in the space between the person and the next wave of it. Goats, studied in a UK research project, were able to distinguish photographs of happy human faces from angry human faces, and preferred to approach the happy faces. They also showed increased right hemisphere brain activity in response to angry faces. consistent with the neural processing of threat across mammalian species. Goats have not lived in close quarters with humans for as long as dogs or cats. Their domestication history is different. Their social bond with individual humans, typically less intense. And yet the capacity is there. The ability to read the human face, to register its emotional content, to organize a behavioral response accordingly. The sensitivity runs deeper than domestication. It may be the ancestral inheritance of any social animal that has ever needed to read another. A cat will sometimes sit outside a closed door when the person on the other side is carrying something heavy. Not meowing, not scratching, simply present at the threshold. This behavior has been noted repeatedly in accounts from people moving through difficult periods. The cat has not been admitted. It is not demanding to be admitted. It is maintaining proximity at the closest point the door allows. In feline social terms, this is a form of attendance. The body positioned at the edge of what is accessible, maintaining connection with the social field it belongs to. The cat at the door is not giving up. It is waiting, without insistence. In the last place, the distance allows. The arc has moved deeper now. What the animal does with absence, with thresholds, with what it cannot fix. This is the weight the question always carried. That cat at the door. That image may have landed somewhere specific in you, because you know that feeling from the other side. The one who sits just outside what someone else has closed, or the one who hears the quiet on the other side of the door and stays anyway. The tension of the last few facts is real. You don't have to move away from it. Notice what is happening in your body right now, not to solve it. Just to let it be exactly what it is for a moment. The second half of tonight moves into something quieter. The animals will begin to simply rest. You can rest alongside them. When a person and their dog are quietly together, sitting, resting, simply present in the same room without activity, their nervous systems begin to fall into step with each other in ways that are measurable through heart rate and stress hormone levels. This finding, from research into co-regulation, suggests that the steadiness the animal offers is not a product of the animal doing something. It is a product of the animal being something in proximity. The nervous systems find each other's rhythm in stillness. The dog does not have to perform comfort. It simply has to stay. Elephants maintain memory of specific individuals, including humans who have shown them consistent care. For decades, field researchers who have worked with wild elephant populations report being recognized by elephants they haven't encountered in many years. The animal approaching with the behavioral markers of bonding recognition, ears relaxed, body orientation open, rumble vocalizations, rather than the threat displays it shows to strangers. The elephant has not forgotten. It has held, in the structure of its memory, the record of being treated gently. The gentle treatment, years ago, is still present in the animal's body as a specific human shape in the world. Researchers suggest that dogs do not carry the same relationship to past and future that humans do, that a dog exists most fully in what is present, not in what was or what might be. This is not a limitation in the dog's inner life. It is a feature of how the dog moves through time. The dog sitting beside you as you carry something difficult is not comparing this moment to a better moment, or calculating when things might ease, or wondering what it should do differently. It is here, entirely here, not elsewhere. This may be the most difficult thing for a human to offer another human. The gift of being fully present with pain without quietly organizing toward escape from it. The dog offers it without effort, in a moment that asks nothing of the future. Research into dog cognition at the Family Dog Project in Budapest found that dogs process human speech in a way that separates emotional tone from word meaning. They use different brain areas for each. One side processes the emotional quality of the voice. The other processes the content of the words. When tone and words match, the dog registers coherence. When they do not align, when you say you're fine and your voice carries something else, the dog registers a mismatch. It hears what you're saying, and it hears what you mean, and it knows the difference. Across cultures, in communities that have historically kept animals for work or sustenance rather than companionship, accounts of animals demonstrating comfort-adjacent behaviors during human loss or illness appear consistently. Working dogs in pastoral communities around the world have been observed to stay close to ill shepherds, follow mourners, and refuse to leave the bodies of their owners for extended periods after death. Across different languages, different ecologies, different relationships to animals, the same observation recurs. The animal stays. The staying is noticed. It is considered significant enough to remember and pass on. A parrot that has been bonded with a person for many years will sometimes say, unprompted, words or phrases associated with comfort that it has only ever heard during the person's difficult moments. The parrot is not strategizing. What it may be doing is something closer to pattern recognition. This combination of signals in my person, the posture, the vocalization, the changed quality of the air, has historically been paired with these sounds. The sounds are available. The parrot produces them. What arrives is comfort that was learned from watching comfort be given. The animal became a keeper of the comfort it had witnessed. People who live alone with a companion animal report significantly lower rates of physician visits than people who live alone without one. The reduction is attributed to multiple pathways: reduced stress, increased activity, a sense of purpose. But researchers also note a subtler effect. The presence of the animal appears to raise the threshold for what feels unbearable. Days that might otherwise tip into crisis remain manageable, held slightly above the waterline by the simple fact of another living thing that needs feeding, that will need walking, that will be there whether or not the day was good. Something to come home to, something that comes home to you. The domestic cat has been found to distinguish between its own name and other words, including words of similar sound, with a response specificity that suggests genuine name recognition. The cat knows when it is being addressed specifically. It does not always respond. Cats are selective in their social engagement in ways dogs are not. But the recognition occurs regardless of behavioral response. The cat hears its name in your voice, and it hears your voice on days when the name is said differently, quieter, or with a weight in it that wasn't there before. The cat has been listening, all along, with more precision than was assumed. In animal-assisted therapy, with adolescents experiencing depression, the animals most effective at reducing self-reported loneliness were not the most demonstrative or affectionate animals. They were the most consistently present ones. The adolescents who benefited most described the animal's consistency. The fact that it was simply there, session after session, without variation in its basic quality of attention, as the core of what helped. not the affection specifically, the consistency, the guarantee of presence, the thing that is waiting when you arrive, the way nothing waiting has waited before. Horses that have been in long-term relationships with specific riders show measurable behavioral differences in the presence of those riders versus other riders. Calme posture, slower breathing, and increased approach behavior during grooming and handling. The horse has not been trained to produce these responses. They emerge from the accumulation of relational experience. The specific rhythm of this person's breathing against the horse's neck, the particular weight of this person in the saddle, the sound of this specific voice saying nothing in particular. The horse knows this person's body the way a person knows a familiar room in the dark, without needing light to navigate it. Oxytocin, released during contact between a human and a companion animal, has been shown in research to quiet activity in the brain's alarm center, the region most associated with detecting threat and generating fear. This quieting is what allows the nervous system to shift out of a defensive state. In humans experiencing social anxiety or the residual vigilance of trauma, this quieting is difficult to produce through voluntary effort. The animal produces it without asking for anything in return. The brain's alarm center, which has been scanning for danger, registers the warm weight of the dog, the purring rhythm of the cat, and finds no reason to continue its alarm. It lowers. The rest follows. A dog that has lived in a home where conflict was frequent will show heightened awareness in situations that resemble the precursors to that conflict. A raised voice in another room, a particular tension in the air. The dog learned, not through deliberate training but through lived experience, to read the emotional weather of its environment. These same dogs often demonstrate marked movement toward the person who appeared most distressed during those moments, placing themselves between that person and the disruption. The dog has learned who needs it most. It goes there. Research into the bond between people moving through loss and their animals consistently finds that the relationship deepens in the period following bereavement. Not because the animal understands the loss, but because it responds to the changed state of the person. The animal registers what loss does to the body. The slower movements, the altered vocal quality, the increased stillness, the changed scent. It responds to these signals with increased proximity and decreased independent activity. From the outside, it looks like the animal knows. From inside the animal's experience, it has simply found the frequency the person is broadcasting and moved to it. The result is indistinguishable from knowing and from comfort. Dogs in shelter environments, when given access to a person who sits quietly in their kennel without initiating interaction, will, within a few minutes on average, initiate contact themselves. The person has not reached toward the dog, not called it, not offered food. They have only been present, without agenda. And the dog, after its initial wariness, comes. Researchers who study approach behavior in dogs note that this response in shelter dogs, who have often experienced abandonment and are typically more cautious, represents a significant form of trust. The dog chooses to approach the person who is simply there. Presence, unhurried and without demand, is enough. Across multiple studies of people managing chronic pain, those with companion animals report significantly lower peak pain intensity than those without. Not lower average pain, but lower peaks. The animal does not reduce the chronic condition. It appears to reduce the moments of greatest intensity. the spikes that otherwise arrive unattended. On the worst days, the presence of the animal changes something about how the worst moment feels. Researchers suggest this is mediated through both the calming effects of touch and the natural redirection of caring for another being. On the worst day, the animal still needs feeding. The person still gets up. The moment of worst pain is not spent alone. Cats, observed in domestic environments, have been documented to match their sleep-wake cycles to those of their bonded humans, particularly in single-person households. The cat, a historically dawn and dusk animal, adjusts its rhythm in response to the human's rhythm over months and years. The adjustment is not complete. The cat will still wake at 4 in the morning sometimes, but the drift toward the human's schedule is measurable and documented. The animal has aligned itself with you, not because it was trained to, because you are the axis around which its daily life turns, and it has oriented accordingly. A rescue dog that was severely neglected in its first year of life, when placed in a stable and caring home, will typically show significant behavioral recovery within the first year, and will demonstrate secure bonding behaviors within 2 years. The recovery is not total. In most cases, certain triggers will always produce a more pronounced response than they would in a dog with an undisturbed early history. But the capacity for secure attachment, the capacity to trust proximity, to relax into care, to approach rather than avoid, does not disappear. It was suppressed. The right environment allows it to return. The dog was always capable of trust. It needed the conditions in which trust becomes possible again. People who talk to their animals, and most do, surveys consistently show rates above 80% in companion animal households. Do so regardless of intelligence, education, age, or any measured personal characteristic. People across all groups talk to their animals. The behavior is not a substitute for human connection or a marker of social isolation. It is something else. A form of expression that does not require managing the other person's response. You do not need to consider how what you say will be received. You can say exactly what you mean, without editing, without consequence, without fear that the animal will think differently of you for having said it. This is rare. The animal has made it possible. The question has been turning, fact by fact. What began as a puzzle about animal behavior has become something else. An account of what it means to be witnessed without conditions, to be read, without having to explain what was written. A study of elderly adults in care facilities found that those with access to therapy animal visits showed lower rates of reported feelings of worthlessness compared to control groups. A specific dimension of depression that is often resistant to standard interventions. The feeling of being simply unnecessary. The animal's approach, unhurried, unchosen for any reason other than proximity, appears to address this specific wound. The animal comes to you because you are there, not because of what you've accomplished, or how you've presented, or what you have to offer. You are there, and so it comes. This is, for some people, an experience they have not had in a very long time. Dogs have been trained to alert to their owner's elevated stress hormone levels before the owner is consciously aware of their own stress state, giving the person several minutes of warning before a stress response or panic attack fully develops. The dogs detect the rise through scent. They signal through learned behaviors, pawing, nudging, circling, that allow the person to take action before the physical cascade has reached its peak. The dog knows what is coming before you do. It has been reading you long enough, and closely enough, that attention and prediction have become the same thing. In clinical settings, children who read aloud to dogs, a practice used in some literacy programs, show not only improved reading fluency, but also reduced reading anxiety. Specifically, in children who had previously been reluctant readers. The dog does not know what a book is. It does not correct pronunciation, does not signal disappointment, does not compare the child to other readers. It lies on the floor and breathes. Its presence removes the social evaluation from the act of practicing. The child reads not to be judged but to be heard. By something that will not judge. The dog has made the space safe by being indifferent to failure. And in that safety, the child learns. Crows, which form long-term pair bonds and family groups, have been observed to bring food to a mate who is ill, visiting repeatedly over days and leaving items that the ill crow is too weak to obtain. This behavior is documented in the research literature on corvid social cognition. The crow's return, the repeated approach, the offering, the departure, the return again, shares the structure of what care looks like when it is organized around the needs of the one who is suffering rather than the capacity of the one who is giving. The crow comes back. Not once. It comes back. Animals in wild environments do not typically perform the bonding behaviors they direct toward their own species when interacting with species from other groups. But the specific animals that have co-evolved with humans have developed the capacity to extend these behaviors across the species boundary. Dogs groom. Cats bunt. Horses synchronize. None of these behaviors were originally for humans. They were behaviors developed within their own species' social needs. What happened, over thousands of years of living together, is that something stretched. The boundary of the social group expanded to include us. The behaviors that had always meant belonging, safety, and care were extended toward the species sharing the shelter. We were admitted. The average person blinks approximately 15 times per minute. During sustained, calm eye contact with a companion animal, the kind of mutual gaze that occurs during a quiet moment of connection, human blink rate slows significantly. This is a marker of reduced arousal the nervous system has found in the animal's eyes. Something that does not require vigilance. The constant low-level scanning that occupied eyes perform when navigating a social world full of potential evaluation. Pose. Rest enters through the eyes, which have stopped looking for what might go wrong. Researchers who study human-animal interaction note that the social pressure normally present during human-to-human emotional exchange, the management of the other person's response, the fear of being too much or not enough, is entirely absent in interaction with companion animals. This absence is not incidental. It is the mechanism, the emotional labor that ordinarily accompanies human connection, the monitoring, the adjusting, the self-editing, is suspended. What remains is expression without management, feeling without performance. The body communicates what it needs to communicate, and the animal receives it without requiring it to be organized differently. This is a different dimension of connection, one the nervous system needs and rarely finds. A dog that has been with a person through a period of significant difficulty will sometimes show a visible behavioral shift in parallel with the person's own, becoming more playful, more active, more relaxed. As the person's well-being improves, the dog did not cause the recovery, but it registered every step of it. The dog that was quieter and closer during the hardest period is now in the better period. Lighter, it followed the person down. It follows them back. The synchrony held in both directions, into the dark and back toward the light. It happened across the years, through the quiet language of two bodies in the same room. The average human heart beats approximately 100,000 times per day. A resting dog's heart beats between 60 and 140 times per minute. A purring cat's heart rate at rest is between 120 and 140 beats per minute. A resting horse's heart rate is between 28 and 40 beats per minute. Different rhythms, different instruments, all of them in proximity to a person who is very still, organizing themselves around the same basic fact of being alive. The heart beats, the lungs move, the body continues. In the company of animals, a person is held inside a field of rhythms that were already here. The rhythm does not need you to maintain it. You only need to be near enough to be held by it. A horse that has been allowed to stand beside a person without being asked to do anything, not to work, not to perform, not to be calm or well-behaved, will often, after some time, rest its head on that person's shoulder. Not always, not on command. In its own time, the weight of the horse's head, 40 to 60 pounds, resting across a human shoulder, is the full measure of what the animal is offering, the complete weight of its trust, placed at the most vulnerable point of a human body, in the quietest possible way. Being understood without words is its own medicine, and sometimes the creature beside you offers it more freely than anyone has. There is something arriving in these facts that does not need to be named for you to feel it. Being understood without words is its own kind of medicine. The animal has been demonstrating this for the last hour, and something in you has been receiving it, not as information, but as something closer to relief. You don't have to earn the rest that's already here. Like the dog that stays, like the cat at the door, like the horse that rested its full weight in trust. You are allowed to simply rest now, in the same unhurried way. What we've been tracing is almost complete. Let the last stretch carry you the rest of the way down. A cat that has lived with a person through years of illness will still, on a recovered day, seek the same position it occupied during the sick ones, beside the person, against their side, in no hurry to be anywhere else. The position has become the habit of care. The place where the cat learned to be useful is also the place where the cat now simply chooses to be. The cat does not distinguish between the two. Neither, perhaps, should we. Dogs in households with infants make immediate behavioral adjustments, moving more slowly, vocalizing less, and showing careful investigative behavior with the infant compared to adult strangers. Something new and small has arrived in the pack. The dog accommodates it without instruction. From the first days, with a gentleness it did not have to be taught. It reads the smallness and adjusts accordingly. The same sensitivity that reads sadness in an adult reads vulnerability in an infant. It is the same instrument. A horse let loose in a paddock after months of therapeutic work will sometimes return to stand near the fence closest to the therapy space. without any occupant there. The place has become associated with something the horse registers as significant. It returns not because it has been called, but because the place holds something it continues to orient toward, even in the absence of the person. The direction of care has become familiar. The horse faces the empty space the way you face something you're still hoping will return. Rats in enriched social environments, with companions, contact, and varied stimulation, develop more complex neural architecture in their prefrontal cortices than rats in isolation. Social contact, consistently provided, builds the brain's capacity for regulation and complexity. The rat in company becomes, over time, neurologically more capable of managing its own inner life. Something about being known, being present with another, builds the very structure of who we become. A dog that sleeps on its owner's bed. In studies of sleep quality in bereaved individuals, correlates with improved sleep onset and reduced nighttime waking, compared to bereaved individuals whose dogs sleep outside the bedroom. Not by much, but enough. The warm weight of presence in the dark makes the night slightly shorter. The body knows it is not alone, even in sleep. And that knowing changes something about how the night passes. Elephants will sometimes stand over the bones of their dead for extended periods, touching them with their trunks in what researchers describe as investigative and bonding behavior toward remains. The elephant does not know what memory is, in the way we use that word, but something in the elephant moves toward what is left of the one it knew. It reaches, it stays, it touches what remains. That reaching, unhurried, unrequired, is its own kind of testimony. A bonded cat will often sit closer to a person who is unwell than to a person who is healthy. Not because it is seeking warmth. As temperature studies suggest, the unwell person's body is not measurably warmer, but for reasons that remain incompletely understood. The cat moves toward what is diminished. This has not been fully explained. It has only been observed, consistently, across many years and many accounts. Some things arrive before the explanation does. Dogs exposed to calming music, specifically compositions with slow tempos and limited dynamic variation, show reduced heart rate and less restless movement, suggesting a state of increased rest. Music enters the dog's world the same way it enters ours, through the body first. Before the mind has time to interpret, the tempo slows, the dog settles, the body follows what the nervous system receives. A person who has experienced social rejection shows increased willingness to seek the company of an animal in the immediate aftermath of the rejection, compared to their baseline behavior in calmer moments. The animal becomes the first step back from isolation. The approach that feels impossible with humans is possible with the animal. Something in the animal's indifference to the rejection. It's not knowing. It's not caring about the categories that wounded. Makes it the safest place to begin again. Horses that have served in equine-assisted therapy programs show decreased stress indicators and increased baseline calm over years of the work, as though the repeated contact with people in vulnerable states has, over time, itself calmed the horse. Something moves in both directions. The person is steadied by the horse. The horse, over years of steadying people, becomes more settled itself. Care given and care received are not always separate processes. A dog in the final weeks of its life will often seek out more physical contact with its bonded human, lying against them for longer periods, initiating touch more frequently. There is no awareness of what is ending. The body simply moves toward warmth and closeness, as it has always moved toward warmth and closeness, only more so now. In the end, the body chooses the same things it has always chosen. The same person, the same position, the same quiet. Shelter cats that have been in long-term residence, months or years, and have low adoption rates often form deep bonds with the shelter workers who care for them daily. The cat knows who comes back, across all the different hands that reach into its space, some kind, some hurried, some gentle. The cat has identified the ones who return. It has organized its trust around consistency. That is all it required. That someone kept coming back. The dog that stayed. The cat at the door. The horse that rested its full weight across a human shoulder, giving it entirely, without asking for anything back. Something as quiet as an animal that simply remained. That quiet has been moving through you this whole time. You don't have to hold it now. Let it hold you. A cat that has been through a move to a new home will return, in its first nights there, to rest near the object that smells most like the person it lives with. The worn jacket, the pillow, the corner of a favorite chair. It navigates an unfamiliar world by returning to the scent of what is familiar. Among everything unfamiliar, it finds the one thing it knows and settles. Dogs left briefly alone with a recording of their owner's voice showed lower stress hormone levels than dogs left alone in silence. The voice, even recorded, even disembodied, carries enough. Something in the sound says, the person is near. The body registers it the way it would register presence. Warmth, arriving through sound, through the particular frequency of one familiar voice. An old dog, asleep at the foot of the bed, breathes at about 12 to 20 breaths per minute, a rate that, in the quiet of a shared room, becomes the rhythm against which a sleepless person often finally falls asleep. Not because it was intended, because it is there, the rhythm of an animal breathing, in the dark, unhurried, continues into sleep. Something about the steadiness of it, the fact that it does not pause, does not hold, does not try, makes it safe to follow. A horse standing in a field at dusk, head low, eyes half closed, is demonstrating what behavioral researchers call rest standing, a state of light sleep that horses enter while remaining upright, held by the passive stay apparatus in their legs. The horse rests while standing. The legs do the holding. The body lets go of the effort of keeping itself up, while remaining, technically, awake. Something is always doing the holding. You don't always have to be the one. Cats sleep an average of 12 to 16 hours per day, not because they are lazy, but because their physiology is built for brief, intense activity followed by extended rest. The cat's sleep is not failure. It is the design. Rest is not what follows effort. For the cat, rest is where it actually lives. The long, unhurried middle of the day, warm and still, the body doing exactly what it was built to do. A bonded pair, a person and their dog, will, in a shared room in the late evening, often find their breathing falling into the same slow rhythm. Not by design, not by instruction, by proximity and quiet and the unhurried passage of time together. The breaths align the way two candles in the same room will eventually flicker in the same direction, through the shared air between them, without either one trying. The sound of purring, between 25 and 50 Hz, falls within a frequency range that research has linked to stimulating bone density and connective tissue repair in animal studies. The cat purring against you is, by accident of evolution, producing something that may heal, not by intention, not by design, simply by being what it is, in the place it has chosen to be, making the sound its body makes when it is content. An elderly dog asleep against a person who is also asleep shares, in that moment, the simplest form of everything we have traced tonight. Two animals, breathing in the same room, neither one asking anything of the other. The bond between them has traveled through arguments and recoveries, and ordinary Tuesdays and long nights. And it has arrived here, two bodies, present, unhurried, carrying nothing that the other does not already know. The last time a dog greets you at the door, it does not know it is the last time. It greets you the same way it has greeted you every time, as though you have been away for years, as though your return is the best thing that has happened all day. There is a gift in that, in being received that way, in mattering that much to something. On an ordinary afternoon, the fact that animals sense human emotion through scent, body signals, and behavioral cues means that your sadness has never been invisible to the animals near you. They have always known. They have simply responded in the only language available to them, with presence, with proximity, with quiet, no translation required, no explanation asked for. That language was always enough. It was always more than enough. The word companion comes from the Latin com panis, literally, one who shares bread with you. The animals beside us were, in the oldest sense, the ones who shared what we had, the warmth, the shelter, the meal, the night. We called this practical. It was also, always, something more than practical. It was a kind of mutual belonging that neither side had to arrange. There is no clinical name for what happens when an animal lies beside a person in sadness, and the person, after a while, feels slightly less alone. There are studies. There are mechanisms. There are neurotransmitters and stress hormones and behavioral paradigms. But the experience itself, the particular quality of not being alone in the presence of an animal that has chosen to remain, exists slightly outside what research can fully capture. Some things can be measured and still not fully named. You already knew this. Before the facts, before the science had language for it, you already knew that something in an animal's presence could reach a place that words had not found. You have known it since the first time a creature settled beside you without being asked and stayed without needing anything in return. Or since the memory of that, being understood without words is its own medicine. And sometimes the creature beside you offers it more freely than anyone has. That is what tonight confirmed. We began with a dog that hadn't moved. We traveled through cats at thresholds and horses that soften, through the rat that freed its companion and the crow that kept returning, through the parrot that learned the words for comfort by watching comfort be given. We ended here. Two animals breathing in the same room, in the dark, neither one requiring anything of the other. The arc ran from observation to recognition, from the question of what animals do, to the quieter answer of what their doing means, which is that being witnessed, without language, without condition, without a requirement to explain yourself, is one of the oldest forms of being held that exists. The animal at your feet tonight, or the memory of one, or the felt sense of one that has stayed close. It already knows what you carry. It has always known, and it has stayed anyway. Being understood without words is its own medicine. The creature beside you does not need you to explain your sadness. It only needs you to be present, and it will be present alongside you, in the most uncomplicated, most ancient, most unhurried form of comfort that exists between living things. That comfort was here before language. It may outlast everything we've tried to build in its place. Psychology for sleep brought you here, to this particular quiet. Rest in it. The dog that stayed, the cat at the door, the horse that rested its full weight across a human shoulder, giving it entirely, without asking for anything back. That weight is also here, in a different form. Let what you have been carrying settle, the way an animal settles at the end of its long day, not because it has resolved anything, but because the body knows when it is time. The body has always known, being understood without words. Let that be the last thought. You are not alone in this room. You are allowed to stop now. Not when things are better. Not when you have figured it out. Now, whatever you are carrying, it does not need to be carried through the night. Set it down here, in this room, or in the felt sense of something that has stayed close in memory. You don't have to explain yourself tonight. You don't have to be anything other than what you are. Your sadness was never invisible to the ones who love you without language. They have always known. They have stayed anyway. Let your body be heavy now. Let it rest the way an animal rests. Completely. Without apology. Without the task of keeping itself awake for anything more. Like the dog that stayed. You are allowed to simply be here. Good night.